long overdue.
Now with Zoom, though, you can stay on the meeting and we won't have any risk of losing quorum. You could just keep it on your phone.
I could just put myself on mute. Thank you, Mayor. I'm particularly happy this afternoon to welcome former Mayor Holtzman. One sec. Nay.
Well, we could just sub in your nay. We know it's going to happen on everything anyways.
It's just opposed.
We'll just post up the 7-1 votes for the rest of the day. You good with that?
You don't have to put it so bluntly, Scott.
I know.
Okay, well, I made the big mistake of actually doing my intro for my e-blast, which took up 18 minutes of the 20-minute break. So Glenn Gower might be filling in for something shortly. I think we have quorum, eh? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we do. Okay.
Get some food, Jen. We need you to have food in you.
Oh, no. I would hate to. Hey, at least I don't have any carbs because then I would be falling asleep. Here we go. So the next item is the application to alter 175 Main Street. Hang on, I put my thing back up. I had to fight to get back in line too, so here we go. Application to alter 175 Main Street, the Deschatelet building, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We're going to have a presentation combined on items 2, 3, and 4 by the Heritage Planner Patrick and J.C. Renault. Why is it echoing before? It's weird. Then the next item is the zoning bylaw amendment for 205 Scholastic Drive. And the third item, so item number 4, is the zoning bylaw amendment 360 Deschatelet Avenue. So, as I said, we're going to have a short presentation on the 3. We have a lot of speakers on the 3. And so, are you ready? I will also let you all know that Kevin Wary is also available throughout all 3 or as required for any questions. Okay. So, and Kevin, are you there? Is Kevin there, Melody?
I'm here.
Okay, just so you know, feel free to jump into the answers as needed as well. I don't know if you're in the same space as everybody else, but whatever works. So let's go ahead with the 5-minute presentation, hopefully 5 minutes from Ms. Fitzpatrick, J.C. Renault. The floor is yours. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, thank you. So I'll try to go quite quickly. So as you mentioned, we have the applications for the zoning bylaw amendment and Ontario Heritage Act for this property. Next slide. The property is located in the community of Old Ottawa East, located between Main Street and the Rideau River in the Greystone Village subdivision. Next slide. This is the Heritage Building. It's designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act. It was constructed in 1885 as a scholastic kit for the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, a missionary order. Next. Here's a site plan showing the Heritage application, which is to remove the rear addition, which was built circa 1950, known as the chapel wing. The wing contains a modernist chapel designed by Montreal architect Louis Lapierre, which is a heritage attribute of the building. Next slide. The opening in the east facade will be created by the removal of the wing will be stabilized and protected through the creation of a temporary infill wall in anticipation of future heritage permits applications. Next. The alterations are proposed to accommodate the adaptive reuse of the primary portion of the building into a mixed-use facility, which would include an elementary school, a community center, and future residential uses. The building has been vacant since 2016, and various opportunities for adaptive reuse have been explored. Throughout the process, the chapel has presented a significant challenge to the adaptive reuse due to its narrow configuration, layout, construction, and structural integrity. Staff are recommending approval of the heritage application as it conserves the, thank you, next slide. Just the one showing the full building. Staff are recommending approval of the heritage application as it conserves the overall cultural heritage value of the building itself. The application will facilitate the rehabilitation and adaptive reuse of the most significant portion of the building and ensure the long-term preservation of the heritage resource. Next slide. In terms of process, as we mentioned, there's a heritage permit application and zoning bylaw amendment in front of you today, and as well a letter of understanding between Recreation Services and the school board, which will be brought forward to council in October. And Kevin Weary is here to answer any questions related to that. I'll now pass it on to Saeed Saya, Manager Development Review of Central, who can speak to the zoning.
Great, thank you, Anne. Madam Chair, the zoning amendment, can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. The zoning amendment proposed for the site does three things. First, it will add a school as a permitted use in the GM zone in Area A that's shown on the schedule before you. Secondly, it will modify the performance standards to allow for parking off-site and to permit additional projections above the allowable height limit. And then third, we're placing a holding zone on the site as well until such time that we've received a building permit for a school or community use, or an agreement's been entered into with a school or community use for use on the subject property. The next slide, please. Oh, next slide. Now, Madam Chair, you mentioned another application. We have also before us a zoning amendment for 360 Des Châtelets. This is a 9-story, 35-unit apartment building. And in this case, we are recommending three rather minor adjustments to the zoning bylaw to accommodate the site. And as you can see here where the star is on the location plan, it's an awkward shaped parcel just in front of, sort of to the southwest of the other property. Next slide, please. Okay, so in this case, the zoning's been amended to do mainly two things to accommodate the proposed building. First is to allow an interior side yard of approximately 3 meters, and also to allow a washroom to be considered as a projection above the required height limit. There are other projections allowed within the roof, but a washroom is not one of them. Next slide. Oh, next slide. Yep, thank you. So these are just some other views of the site plan. And here you can see the elevation of the building. So again, for the projection, there are other, mechanical spaces, elevator room are allowed up there, but a washroom is not a permitted projection above that. So again, this is a fairly minor zoning amendment for 360 Des Châtelets. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. All right. So the first item that we're dealing with is the application to alter 175 Main Street, the Châtelet building, a property designated in Report 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We do have a number of speakers. It's starting with Tom Scott, followed by Ron Rose, and then David Fleming. So Tom Scott. And I'll remind everybody, if you're listening all morning, you know that there's 5 minutes that everyone has. Is Tom there, Melody?
Madam Chair?
Yes?
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for opportunity to speak. We understand that this is a complex case with a lot of community-based engagement and history. This area is well known to the long-term Old Ottawa East neighbors, most of whom who never expected that a heritage building could be dissected and bits and pieces deemed no longer of value. Madam Chair, member of the committee, you will clearly know that the alumni of the Oblates would be far-reaching, up to and including the Right Honorable John Turner, who attended school here in decades past. They would certainly be concerned, if not upset, about the potential breaking of promises made to the Oblate fathers to preserve the heritage aspect of the Scholastic. We feel that their voices have not been heard, but will also feel frustrated that the current COVID-19 based process has no allowance for them. Those men who graduated from this order's presence and active engagement in Old Ottawa East may yet make their concerns known to you. We tried to express to the city the grave concerns from several of the senior oblate men about this turn of events. They were already devastated by the requirement to reposition their cemetery to Gatineau to make space for regional's plans. And even more so when it was discovered that a number of unmarked graves came up during site excavation. The Oblate Cemetery had also protected the remains of several nuns who had died in the fire that reduced their original convent, and there had been concern at the time of transfer that these had not been well documented. So it turned out. Unfortunately, city staff could not deal with the concern that we raised about the school board's necessary permissions and authorities to build what amounts to a podium arrangement, but also how and who will deal with similar concerns about asbestos and lead in the floors above the school rooms. We also asked, is there not a provincial standard for split play space for preschool, kindergarten, and elementary levels, and how much of this is dependent on crossing into the forecourt as opposed to using a secured space to the east of the central building? I'm sorry, madam, but we were just confused that all these planning and documents appear to have put no effort into planning. They're all about development, nothing about history and heritage, nothing about the most effective use of the space for social housing needs, nothing about the needs of the children in an educational environment. And we're also looking for long-term engagement of a community association, and I think that's key. We think the city staff and the city can do better, and I think you'll show us on this file. Previously, we sent a note to Mr. Bonneau concerning the zoning bylaw amendment for the above-noted site, a ZBLA request, which we have to admit we found somewhat confusing. The core of the concern, the current zoning in question does not allow a mixed-use facility that would include a school. It appears to us to be silent regarding a school on those things that are permissible, which is the main reason why this second item comes to your committee today. Further, as I've already noted, we have not heard any clear and positive information about the school board's request for authority to what amounts to a podium, and whether or not this requires provincial agreement or not. We believe that the sequencing of events to de-designate a part of the Scholastica would see a number of these steps having to occur first before any request for lifting the heritage status or approving a demolition permit should be considered. None of this was presented to the Old Ottawa East Community Association, to the Oblates, nor to the city at the time the property was being considered for sale to regional. That company's senior home already exceeds what we believe to be a height restriction to avoid overshadowing the existing heritage building and impeding its perspective. We have no further information about what is intended to the immediate east of the building and why the chapel wing is such a hindrance. We view that the chapel itself certainly is no more structurally unsound or difficult to repurpose than the central block itself. For that reason, Madam Chairman, I would ask that the members of the Planning Committee see this proposal as premature, as did the members of the Heritage Subcommittee, and needs to await other necessary council and school board approvals before proceeding. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Councilor Menard has a question for you. I'm sorry that we're not going to, we don't have a system that allows me to go to the staff to comment directly to you, but we'll catch up on that after all the speakers have spoken. So Councilor Menard, questions, please.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I'll keep it quick. Thanks, Mr. Scott, for being here. I know we're not exactly on the same full wavelength on this one, but I did want to reassure you, because one of your questions at Built Heritage Subcommittee, and from that was what kind of teeth we'd have going forward to ensure that the other elements were getting built in a process that was appropriate. And I'll be bringing a motion today, Madam Chair, which committee coordinator will have, that will speak to some more teeth in terms of how this process will occur and what would happen in terms of the school board being present in the building. So I just want to give you that reassurance, Mr. Scott, because I know you've been active on this and that the questions you've asked have helped to perform, to alleviate some of the concerns that I've had through the questions and answers I've received back from staff through you. So thank you for all you've done and appreciate you being here. And you'll see that motion shortly. I'm not sure, Madam Chair, if you want me to read that out now.
Why
before-
don't you?
Yes, okay. Okay,
Yeah,
let me-
go ahead.
Okay. So the motion is, whereas the report recommends approval of an application under the Ontario Heritage Act to alter the existing building at 175 Main Street, which includes the removal of the chapel wing. And whereas the proposed alterations are associated with the conversion of the primary portion of the Des Châtelets building into a mixed-use facility, which would include an elementary school, a potential community center, and potential residential uses. And whereas additional measures should be taken to ensure the long-term adaptive reuse of the building, therefore be it resolved that the Planning Committee recommend to Council that recommendation 1 be modified to add the following additional condition of approval as follows. The submission of a complete heritage permit application for alterations associated with the new school use or community center, including the alterations to the front entrance and the bay on the east facade.
And who are you going to have move that motion?
Councillor Leeper has agreed to move that.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Next up is Ron Rose, who's the interim chair, Planning Committee, Old Ottawa East. Ron, are you there?
I am here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks very much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this agenda item. You've already introduced me, so I've saved 20 seconds. The Des Châtelets building is the heart of the Central District of Old Ottawa East. It was built before the original village was incorporated and features prominently in many of the early pictures of the community. A number of people in the community firmly believe that the chapel wing should be saved, that its structural integrity is still open for debate, and that the owners knew that they were buying a heritage building and should be prepared to pay whatever it costs to maintain that asset. On the other hand, the community of Old Ottawa East is badly underserved for community services. The French language school is living on a year-to-year lease in temporary quarters. The existing community center, which is the former town hall, was built at the beginning of the 90s and is totally inadequate. And thirdly, there is a lack of affordable housing within Old Ottawa East. The community believes the benefits that have been proposed should the sale proceed to the Catholic School Board, those benefits being a new gymnasium and community center for the community, a permanent school for the Catholic School Board, and the possibility of affordable housing. All these outweigh the loss of the chapel wing, but only, and I repeat only, if the proposed benefits materialize. Therefore, the Community Association passed a motion at a special meeting in May of 2020. And I believe all the members of the committee have copies of that motion. But you can see from that motion that the community can only agree to the demolition of the chapel wing if those community benefits will follow. We were happy to hear during Tuesday's meeting of the Built Heritage Subcommittee of Councillor Menard's efforts to work with staff to find wording that will provide those assurances. And we look forward to hearing the results of these discussions before reaching a final position. And Councillor Menard has just read out the conditions. I'm afraid my shorthand is not adequate, so I didn't copy it all down, but we would indeed have time to look at that. The Community Association also agrees with the conditions specified in the motion, specifically the documentation of the building and the retention of many of the stained glass windows. Indeed, the community would be pleased if the new owners of the Deschâtelet building could dedicate a space within the building to celebrate the history and significance of the chapel wing. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Appreciate that. Councillor Menard has a question for you.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here. Ron, my question is actually around your comment at the very end, and it's another motion, Madam Chair, and I guess we're off on process here, but it's another motion to speak to the commemoration that Mr. Rose has spoken about. So maybe I'll get that on the agenda as well right now, if that makes sense to you.
Who's moving this one?
And that's also Councillor Leeper or Councillor Brockington. I think Councillor Leeper is. Brockington may have left.
Are you Councillor Leeper? So this is about commemoration?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's whereas the report recommends approval of an application under Ontario Heritage Act to the existing building of 175 Main Street, which includes the removal of the chapel wing. And whereas the proposed alterations are associated with the conversion of the primary portion of the Deschâtelet building into a mixed-use facility, which would include an elementary school, a potential community center, potential residential uses. And therefore be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend to Council to direct staff to work with the owners to review opportunities for a display, in addition to a plaque within the designated building at 175 Main Street that would commemorate the chapel.
Okay. Do you have any questions for Mr. Rose?
I'm good. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rose. Mr. Fleming, David Fleming, Chair of Heritage Ottawa Advocacy Committee. Welcome. Thanks for your submission.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Heritage Ottawa believes that the statement Heritage Ottawa is pleased to have the opportunity to comment on the staff recommendation for the Deschâtelet building at 175 Main Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We strongly support the designation of this property in 2013, and we're pleased 2 years later when the new owner, Regional Group, purchased the entire Oblate property and made a commitment to preserve the heritage designated building. The Châtelet building was constructed in 1885 as a scholastic gate for the Oblates of Mary Immaculate. As the order grew, the facility was altered and enlarged with 2 new wings added in the north and south in 1925. A 5-story wing was added in 1950, which includes the 2-story chapel, an early example of the work of Canadian modernist architect Louis J. Lapierre. The design is characteristic of a French modernist and features concrete construction with buttress-like columns and a vaulted ceiling. Heritage Ottawa believes that this revised state of cultural heritage impact, which notes that the demolition is merely another example of how the property has been, quote, modified significantly since its construction, unquote, is more of an excuse for demolition rather than a valid statement about the heritage of the property. Over the past 5 years, Regional Group has benefited greatly from the opportunity to undertake an extensive development of low-rise and mid-rise residential dwellings, as well as the construction of an 8-story retirement home, while seeking to sell the heritage property to an owner that would undertake Regional's commitment to preserve the significant example of Ottawa's built heritage. We were pleased when the Conseil des Écoles Catholiques du Centre-Est expressed an interest in adapting the building for use as a school. Such use would not only preserve its heritage attributes, but would be in keeping with the property's statement of cultural heritage value. A letter of understanding is under development between the CCE and the city about the potential inclusion of a community recreational component, a community center inside the Deschâtelet building, and a new gymnasium structure on the north side of the property. The top 2 floors of the building are also being considered for affordable housing. No details, however, are available regarding how the building will combine these 3 uses. it all remains hypothetical, which has prevented the applicant from submitting a firm proposal of adaptive reuse, which would normally accompany an application to demolish. After a careful reading of the documentation associated with this application, we are not convinced that either the applicant or the city have made a persuasive argument to justify the demolition of the chapel wing. Heritage Ottawa believes that under these circumstances, the demolition is premature. We are being asked to balance the loss of a significant heritage attribute of the building against the benefits of a repurposed building, which would bring to the community, but exactly what those benefits are will remain unknown until after the demolition is done. This demolition would be putting the cart before the horse. If the school has no requirement for the chapel wing at this time, why not stabilize it while the city further considers its option, or the current owner tries to find another partner to enable them to live up to their commitment to preserve the building made over 5 years ago.
1 minute.
The chapel wing is essentially structurally sound, and although its preservation may be costly, the repairs and configuration for adaptive use would probably not exceed the total cost of its demolition and the construction of a new building, either for use by the new owner or the City of Ottawa. Surely, as the city begins to reconsider its operational capabilities and demands in a post-COVID-19 world, and its long-term effect on how the city provides services to its citizens, to demolish a structure that may potentially provide a much-needed civic use could be considered short-sighted. Any decision to approve the demolition should at least be conditional upon the approval of a site plan application that would specify how the building will be used for educational, community, and housing needs. Finally, the preservation of the chapel should not be a deal breaker to the imaginative and appropriate adaptive reuse of the rest of the building.
Time.
Instead, it offers a challenge to the current owner.
Thank you.
Therefore, urge the planning committee.
Thank you very much. I see that Councillor Menard has a question for you, Mr. Fleming. Councillor Menard?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, thanks for being here, Mr. Fleming. I understand your position. I'm not on the same page, but I do understand where you're coming from. In terms of, if you could see the memorandum of understanding with the school board that the city is negotiating, the letter of understanding with OCH for affordable housing in this building, and the adaptive reuse for a school and full community center in the building, if that was apparent and was a guarantee for you, would your position change at that point, or would it remain the same?
Well, we think that there should be more of an effort made to try to find an adaptive use of the chapel wing. I mean, it's a structurally sound building. It may not meet the needs for a community center, but we need more affordable housing in the city. There are all sorts of other demands that are going to be placed on city council in the upcoming years, and maybe not as a result of COVID-19. And I think, to cut short the options for using this structure, I think is short-sighted. I think we would have to look at that if we were convinced that there was no other option. I don't think, though, that the owners should have given up on it so quickly. They have developed much of the property already. And, I'm thinking of, the example that the city had with the Sisters of the Visitation Convent on Richmond Road, where Ashcroft Ashcroft was able to go ahead and build much of their new development while the heritage building still falls under disrepair and is in danger of having to be demolished. And I don't want to see this happen here. I don't think that given the time and the effort that has been put into finding a new use now, that this is enough. I think we should be looking further.
Okay, I appreciate that. I do think the holding conditions we're putting in place and the MOU and the work that's been done here will realize that concern and see it through to adaptive reuse. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yes, and I agree with that. And I thank you for bringing that up both at the Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting and for the motion today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Paul Goodkey, you're up next. You have 5 minutes. Thanks for your submission. Paul, did I see you on the screen?
He's there.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
I think you need to speak up just a tad, please.
Okay, can you hear me now? Is this better?
Yeah, that's the best. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for this opportunity. My name is Paul Goodkey. I'm a 39-year resident of Old Ottawa East, past chair of the Ottawa East Planning Committee. I'm an engineer, and I have considerable knowledge with regard to construction and renovation of heritage buildings. I have a number of concerns and objections and suggestions regarding this application, and I have submitted written comments and recommendations for your consideration. First, I'd like to point out that the Cunliffe and Associates, the Chatelet residence structural assessment dated November 30th, 2016 was not put on the DevApps website. This is a very informative structural assessment, 2016. And it's referenced in the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. And although it's not on the website, Sally Coots provided it to a few members of the Old Ottawa East Community Association. And I trust that Melody has provided you with a PDF copy of that structural assessment. Secondly, you and all decision makers must understand, simply stated, there are not major structural issues with the chapel wing of the heritage designated the Chatelet building. Accordingly and appropriately, the chapel wing and the heritage protected interior of the second floor chapel should be repurposed and not demolished. In my opinion, this application has been predicated on incorrect interpretations of the structural engineer's assessments of the chapel wing. During last Tuesday's Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting, there was no denial of this reality. On Tuesday, the applicant's architect spoke about egg cartons, and Mr. Lormer provided a cross-section drawing of the chapel wing, dated September 27th, 2016. That cross-section was not previously made public, would have been very helpful in the assessment of the chapel wing. In my opinion, this drawing, complete with the height measurements, reinforces the viability of repurposing the chapel wing. The chapel wing is a perfect location for a community center and recreational uses on the levels 1 and 2, and the 4th and 5th floors are perfect locations for such much needed affordable housing. I think it was said that those spaces it's narrow, but no, it's not too narrow for affordable housing, and we need affordable housing in the city and in Old Ottawa East. With regard to the structural integrity of the chapel wing, I suggest city staff, the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement author, the public, and the councillors have been misled from the outset of any and all pre-application discussions. Indeed, the cart has been put before the horse. The public members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee have voted against the city staff recommendation for very appropriate reasons. In my opinion, it is time to put the brakes on this application. I trust planning committee members and council will justly consider my comments and, most importantly, the merits of the Built Heritage Subcommittee decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Goodkey. Seeing No questions. We're going to next go to Kelly Rodenizer. Kelly is with the applicant regional group. Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kelly Rodenizer with the regional group, and we're the applicant for the demolition of the Châtelet Chapel Wing. I brought my team with me to provide additional details and address technical issues that you might have on our applications. So we have Doug Vandeham from Hobbit Architecture. I have John Stewart from CHRLM, who's our heritage expert, and Rick Cunliffe from Cunliffe and Associates, who is our structural engineer. I'm going to provide you with a very brief background and context onto why we're requesting the demolition of the chapel wing that was built in the 1950s by the in-house team of the Oblat's fathers, who undertook the construction themselves. Over the last 5 years, Regional has worked with several potential users and purchasers to try to repurpose the Châtelet building. All parties that have looked into reusing the chapel wing have had significant concerns with the wing's 1950s construction, specifically to the structural integrity and to bring the building up to the current building code standards. In late 2019, CECCE.
Sorry.
Is that okay, Jan?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. And Regional entered into a conditional purchase and sales agreement for the CECCE to purchase the Châtelet building, finalize negotiations with the City Parks and Rec Department to build a full-size gymnasium and a community center and demolish the chapel wing. The school board, prior to entering into this APS, determined they did not require the chapel space for programming or for the school, nor could they find any suitable user to repurpose the chapel wing and associated spaces. The current plan that's being proposed is that a Châtelet on the ground floor, half would be used for the city for a community center and the other half for a school. The second and third floor would be for the exclusive use of the school. And the fourth and fifth floor would be for the potential affordable residential units. It's our opinion that the current proposed plan for the Châtelet is a true partnership with the CECE, City Parks and Rec, and the potential for affordable housing. Now, questions were raised at the Heritage Committee about what would happen if the APS of the chapel, with the CECE, if the chapel wing wasn't demolished. My response was it had not been contemplated and we would need to discuss further. I wanted to provide Planning Committee clarity. After speaking with our owners, Regional's position is that if the chapel demolition was not permitted, that we would not be in a position to complete the land sale with the City of Ottawa for the community center. Also, the CECC has verbally confirmed that they would not be willing to purchase the chapel wing if it were to remain, and representatives from CECE are here to speak to that as well too, if required. I also want to note, based on some of the other speakers' comments, that the fathers were contacted about what we're doing here with the Châtelet, and they've confirmed they have retained all the artifacts from the chapel and have no further need for anything in the chapel wing. It's also important to note that Regional has engaged with the community association and the councillor throughout the heritage and planning process for all these applications. I want to provide further clarity. Sorry, I apologize. So the demolition application before you today, if approved, will allow Regional to finalize our conditional purchase and sales agreement with the CECCE and negotiations with the city for the community center and full-size gymnasium. We agree with the staff report and ask that you approve our application. Also, Councillor Menard shared the first motion that he presented, which was with regards to the submission of a heritage permit, and we have no issues with the motion as drafted.
1 minute.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. So if anyone has any questions for Kelly or her team on the application to alter 175 Main Street. No? Good. Hang on. Thank you very much, Kelly and team.
Thank
we'll
you.
See you back here. Michael Polwin. Michael, do you need time to speak?
Actually, no, Madam Chair. I'm simply here to answer any questions that members of the committee may have, if there are any.
Okay, I don't think so on this item. So that's it for our speakers on item number 2, which is to approve the application to alter the building at 175 Main Street, which includes the removal of the chapel wing and the construction of a temporary infill wall according to plans submitted by Hoban Architecture, dated May 2020 and July 2020, conditional upon. And then there's the conditions upon. On this particular item, we have a motion that Councillor Leeper is moving on behalf of Councillor Menard. Without reading it again, just briefly state what it is. Councillor Menard?
Yes, so this motion adds to the holding condition that staff have put in place so that the chapel could not be demolished unless there were certain conditions met. And it adds to it in that there needs to be a heritage application for alteration for more elements than just the chapel, but the rest of the school coming into the space.
And I think staff are supportive of that motion.
It's my understanding, and I spoke to the school board about it as well, and they were okay with it.
So Anne and JC, you confirm that?
Yes, Madam Chair, staff have no concerns with the proposed motion.
Okay, and then there's the second motion. Councillor Menard, do you want to briefly remind us of that one?
Yeah, this is a view to work together to see about commemorating the space within the building that remains and commemorate the chapel within that building. There's requests from the community to do this. Some stained glass windows are going to be kept, as many as possible. This adds to that to say there should be more of a commemoration of the space within the community.
Great, and I think staffs are supportive of that as well.
Yeah.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Perfect. All right, then thank you. So on the item as I just read out, does anyone have any questions of staff or otherwise? Councillor Menard, are you there for wrap up?
Yes, Madam Chair, I can be quick. Excuse me, I've got something in my throat here. I'm not sick or anything, but
well, you're in your own space, so it's okay.
Cookie left over from my lunch.
Do you have any water? You want to take a quick drink? We'll wait.
Excuse me.
30 seconds.
I think I'm okay.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, thank you. And so I do have just some wrap-up comments. Thanks, Madam Chair. This is not an easy one overall, but this is really part of an important step towards the construction of a community center, a school, affordable housing units within the Deschâtelet building that will return life and community utility to this historic site. I do regret the removal of the chapel wing, and I know how attached many members of the community are to it. It has been unused in the last 5 years, and I understand there is a process in place to achieve the other pieces that we're talking about. They're incredibly important. Heritage staff have actually linked the application to the proposed adaptive reuse through a condition in the zoning bylaw, as I spoke to. That holding symbol will help achieve that in addition to the motion today. There is a memorandum of understanding between the City Recreation Department and the school board on the community center, and it's scheduled to go to council in October for approval. And I've been pleased with the progression of that, speaking with staff about and the school board about how that's progressing. In addition, the Old Ottawa East Community Association has passed a resolution conditionally supporting the application from the Built Heritage Subcommittee as well as Planning Committee towards the sale of the building. The school board and the community activities group of Old Ottawa East have also signed a letter of interest outlining mutual community objectives that could be achieved through the thoughtful integration of the school and the community center and a gymnasium facility within the larger neighborhood. And, given the heritage nature of the chapel wing, we do understand objections to its demolition and the reassurance is needed to achieve these other objectives. I do believe, as staff have also stated, that the negative impact of removal of the chapel wing is counterbalanced by the rehabilitation of the primary portion of the heritage building, and the proposed alterations are going to facilitate the adaptive reuse of Deschâtelet, which will ensure the long-term preservation of that heritage resource in the community. One of the key concerns for some in the community is that there does need to be more teeth. I think we've achieved that. So, for these reasons, I support this. I hope you will too. I have a lot of work ahead of me, as does regional, the school board, the city, and OCH to make all of this a reality, but that is moving in the right direction, and I have faith and trust we're going to get that done. So I appreciate your time today and hope you'll support this item.
Thank you very much. So on the two motions that we know about, the one that adds the holding symbol, that staff support that is being moved on Councillor Menard's behalf by Councillor Leeper, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried. And on the commemoration motion,
Carried.
Carried as well. Perfect. And on the report as amended? Carried. Perfect. Okay, now we're going on to item number 3, which is the zoning bylaw amendment for 205 Scholastic Drive. We have a lot of speakers on this as well. We have representatives from École Élémentaire Catholique, au cours d'Ottawa, and also the its board. But Ron Rose is at the top of the list. So Ron, you go first. You're the interim, well, I already told everybody who you were, but the interim chair, Planning Committee, Old Ottawa East Community Association. Ron?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Again, the association supports the conversion of the Des Châtelet building into a mixed-use facility, which would include a school, community center, and affordable housing. We support the first requested relief, which would permit the building's use as a school. And we would be pleased to see the building return to its original function as a scholastic. We support the proposal to allow permitted projections on the roof of the Des Châtelet building, recognizing that if a building is to take on modern uses such as a school, community center, and housing, mechanical projections will be required. We note that the projections are not as high as the existing triangular pediment which crowns the existing facade. And we hope that every effort will be made by the developers to locate these projections behind the existing pediment. However, we are confused with the wording of the proposal that talks about increased building height. It is our understanding that the physical height of the building, currently 83.7 meters above sea level, will not change. Madam Chair, may we ask, through you, ask staff for assurances that this will not permit the height of the building itself to change. We also would like some clarification from staff on their comment concerning the agreement which was reached following our appeal to the local planning appeals tribunal concerning zoning in this area. There's a statement on page 7 of the report that says the requested relief would bring the zoning into conformity with the secondary plan as per the LPAT decision. We just require some clarification on what that actually means. Reduced interior side yard, we agree to the proposal on this aspect on the understanding that it regularizes the existing situation of the building. Regarding the request for permission to sever the land, our question is, why is this needed? Is it to accommodate the demolition of the chapel, or is there some other reason that we are seeking permission to sever land here? Last comments regarding the reduced parking, reduced parking rate on the land itself. We note the document suggests that the required amount of parking will be provided adjacent to, but not in the lot. We would like to know how the parking requested, which is 16 parking units, was arrived at. Is it on the basis of how many staff will be at the school? Does it include the parking required only for the school? And if so, what accommodation will be made for other uses? For example, if residential uses are permitted where will parking be provided for those residents? If the school is required to provide 16 spots, I would suggest that it be required to provide an additional 20% parking to accommodate visitors and parents. The comment in the staff report that there are over 50 parking spaces available near the school on Du Châtelet and on des Oblates strikes us as rather callous, considering that the buildings at 175 Main Street will have ground floor commercial. Future residents of the Des Châtelet building will need parking. So it is not unreasonable to require the school to provide some additional parking for its visitors and parents. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for your time and for the committee's consideration.
Thank you. So you've asked a bunch of questions, which is not part of protocol, but I'm hoping that staff took note of them. And then when we finish with the delegations, I'm going to ask staff to comment on those questions. Does that sound fair? Councillor Menard,
that sounds more than fair, Madam Chair.
Perfect. Okay, so staff take note of that. Thank you very much. Next up is Nikolai Carriere.
Hello, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear. Loudly.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for having me. I'm a father, a parent of two boys who are now at Ottawa, and I've been a member of the school council since its inception in 2017. And I would like to express the favor for this project for the rezoning to move forward. The school is a wonderful school. It's the benefit that the school brings to the community surpasses my expectations before my children actually started at school. They are conscious about, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here. They're conscious about sustainable development, about ecology, about a holistic approach to education. I could not imagine a better tenant for that building and for that community. I am so privileged to actually be a part of this school, and I'm so happy that when the school announced that they potentially had a permanent location. It's been quite challenging to grow in the current school situation, and it's really, and as you know, living downtown, nothing is cheap. So it's nice to find partners where not only can the school say that we're looking at sustainable development and looking at a community approach to schooling and actually trying to implement it, where they're trying to partner with the city and with Ottawa Community Housing in order to really be hopefully a pillar in not only Greystone Village, but within the Old Ottawa East community. So but thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And I personally can't believe that your school does so well in such a little space. But it sounds to me like they're very lucky to have you serving in, and volunteering with that school. I can tell that there's real pride in your voice. And what grade is your son in?
My son is in grade 2, and the other one just started today in junior kindergarten.
C'est bon.
C'est exceptionnel.
Thank you very much for coming out today.
My pleasure. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Paul Goodkey. Paul, I know you're there. Followed by Monique Moreau. Paul, are you there? Is Monique there, Melody? Maybe we'll go ahead with Monique. Let's go ahead with Monique. Hi, Monique.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I just want to apologize with a bit of construction noise in the background in case that overlaps. So as you mentioned, my name is Monique Moreau, and my 5-year-old son is currently in senior kindergarten, or jardin, at Au Cœur d'Ottawa, and my 3-year-old daughter attends daycare there. I'm here as a parent, as a community member, and as a Francophone. So thank you for allowing me to speak today. I've learned so much listening to the intricacies of your conversations this morning, but I understand you have to decide whether to support the continued efforts of community members, parents, neighbors, the Conseil des Écoles Catholiques Centre-Est, and other partners to create a school, community center, and desperately needed affordable housing. I'm strongly recommending that you approve the amendment to the zoning bylaw for 205 Scholastic Drive. I'd like to provide you with a bit of context as to why this decision is so important to me personally and to my family. I moved from Calgary to Ottawa 20 years ago to be a page in the House of Commons. The reason I'm sharing this particularly nerdy piece of my career history with you is because in order to apply, you had to be bilingual. I grew up as a proud Franco-Albertaine and was able to attend French immersion school and participate in the Francophone community in Calgary. But moving to Ottawa and being exposed to so much French in my day-to-day life was an incredibly enriching experience. And it was a key reason I decided to stay and build a life here. I am now delighted to be raising 2 children as proud Franco-Ontarians. In fact, my son is such a proud Franco-Ontarian that I nearly caused an accident on the 417 reacting to his squeals of delight when he noticed that huge Franco-Ontarian flag above the Gigi's football field on the highway for the first time. I could go on to tell you about constitutional rights to Francophone education and a critical need to support minority language rights, but instead I'd like to focus on how important it is to my family to be able to live, study, and work in a Francophone community in downtown Ottawa. I love living here. The urban setting has been a wonderful place to raise children. We're happy to trade in the sprawling lots and backyards that my friends in Orléans enjoy for checking out the ducks in the canal and the frogs in Brown's Inlet. And I can say this part as a, quote, glebe snob, but I chose Au Cœur d'Ottawa even though much more is so close to my house that I can hear the bell in the mornings, which usually means we're late. Much More is an excellent school, and many of the children in my neighborhood thrive there, but choosing a Francophone school was important to us. I love that I can bike across the beautiful Flora Frick Bridge to take my kids to school. I love that because of the French community that has been built through this school, when we run into our neighbors on the street, the children and parents speak French to each other. This was a revelation to me compared to my childhood growing up in Calgary, where I had to seek that out. And even though it's humbling sometimes, I love that as a result of the incredible community, my kids' French is already better than mine, especially when it comes to keeping up with my son's interests. I can't say that I had 3-axle dump truck and other construction site lingo at the tip of my fingers in French. For the record, that's a camion de ben à 3 essieux if anyone needs that. This is because we're all a part of the Au Cœur d'Ottawa community. Schools are community builders, even more so now during the pandemic when school feels pretty different. When we put my son on the list for Au Cœur d'Ottawa years ago, when he was still a baby, and when the school was meant to be located on O'Connor Street downtown, I could never have imagined years later that we'd still be waiting for a permanent location. It is a credit to the teachers and principal at Au Cœur d'Ottawa who've had to contend with renting space on a year-to-year lease, creating contingency plan to accommodate the growing school community at our current location at Main and Lees. That was meant to be a short-term solution, and I think we're going into our 4th year there. It's also important to me as a community member that we include everyone in our community, including those who need homes, and especially downtown. One of the big draws for our family was the unique situation Au Cœur d'Ottawa is meant to have when they're connected to potentially affordable housing and a community center. 1 minute. I know that it feels sacrilegious to take a chapel down, but I sincerely hope that with careful management and the preservation of the stained glass windows and other meaningful elements, we can instead replace the chapel with a vibrant, inclusive, Francophone community that reflects the origins of the building and location it is in. To that end, I ask the committee to approve the zoning amendment so that we can complete the construction as soon as possible to allow us to continue sending our children to a safe new school. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, and je peux également répondre à vos questions en français. Merci.
Well, you have spoken a lovely story, and I could tell You see, this is like, it's like Hollywood Square. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that TV show, but it's like Hollywood Square where we all get to look and see what everybody else is doing, thinking, you know, whether they're smiling, whatever. And everyone was smiling. And I have a couple of my girls that went to school in Calgary, and one of them who, I know we don't have much time, but I wouldn't even say it. Normally on Old Ottawa East, I say everything. And I actually had a story about the school you're in or where you're having your school. But when we moved to Calgary, and my daughter Elena, who many of you know was born out there, but Andrea, who's 10 years older than Elena, went to Alex Monroe School. And she struggled from the time she went to Bayshore Catholic, moved to Belleville. They didn't have any French available. They let her take grade 4 French in Belleville because that's when it started there. So when we got to Calgary, where there was no French, she was way ahead. So I know what you're saying. And again, it's a lovely story. I mean, walking across Flores Bridge, I mean, it really is a community story, and it's a really Ottawa story. So thank you very much. Mr. Moffat, Scott Moffat, counselor.
Thanks. I just want to thank you for your presentation, but just wanted to thank you as well for mentioning a 3-axle truck, which gives me the opportunity to highlight the wallpaper in Jeff's background. That's all I got. But thank you so much.
Anyway, thank you. Good luck. Make sure you invite all of us to the opening.
Fingers crossed, desperately.
Okay, we'll see what we can do. The next speaker is Marie-Pierre Bourdon, the directrice of the school. Marie?
Chair, I don't see her in the list anywhere.
Okay, let's try Mark Bertrand. Mark, I see you there.
You can also try Paul Goodkey again. I think he may have solved this issue.
Well, I'm trying Mark Bertrand. You're there. Welcome.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me well? Great, thank you. Touching story, Ms. Moreau. It's fun to hear that kind of comments about our programming. I'm a superintendent of education with the Conseil des Écoles Catholiques du Centre-Est, and also superintendent of facilities here, and speaking today on the part of the administration. And so, as I think has been touched on slightly, but the school was established in September of 2017. Just to give a little bit of history, following numerous requests received by the administration for French instruction in the area, and this is what led to the school being called École élémentaire catholique au cœur d'Ottawa. Was not only its location, but also it being the heart of French in the area. So currently we are located in the de Mazenod building, located at 88 Main Street, across the street, pretty much. And it has been a challenge. We are currently in a lease situation, which has been renewed on a yearly basis. But as you know, that building is owned by the English Language School Board, who has plans for those spaces for other projects. And currently the lease is held only until the end of the current school year. The catchment area for this school is Centertown, the Glebe, Old Ottawa South, and Old Ottawa East neighborhoods. And the school, since its opening, has received generous, overwhelming, I would even say, support for the school, for its programming. We currently have over 150 elementary students. And year after year, we unfortunately have to create a waiting list for students wanting, additional students wanting to access the school, which we cannot accommodate in regards to because of space. The school, the CECCE desperately needs a permanent site for this school. We've scavenged the area on many occasions, knocked on doors and looked at various options. And this Deschâtelet option seems to be the best and by far the best. And so it is this school, establishing this school in this building is the CECCE's top priority. And as I said, it presents a great opportunity. Mainly why we've established this school and what we're hearing from parents is there are currently no French language schools in the neighborhood other than the one we just opened. And establishing a permanent site would basically meet that need. Only English language schools are available in the area. which before opening it forced students to attend or to try those English schools, or having to travel great distances. I remember a story of a parent telling us that they were finding it hard because their SK, a senior kindergarten 5-year-old, was falling asleep on the bus because of a 45-minute bus ride to get to the nearest French language instruction school that we currently have. And so relocating permanently this site is very important. We as a board love this project. For us, it's the jewel, bringing together pieces of the Community Association, OCH, and I can speak to those briefly because I know there's been some questions. Currently, we've had many discussions with the Old Ottawa East Community Association, as well as with the CAG, the Communities Activities Group. We've received a letter of support from the CAG, and have also identified with them their needs, ours, and agreed upon operational items of shared spaces and community use before and after school hours. And we're more than happy to oblige. Actually, that's part of our school board mission, really, is to make spaces available. So our spaces in all of our schools are very much available, evenings, weekends, to community use for little to no cost. And with OCH, so the discussions with them have been to add, to construct subsidized housing for the elderly on the upper 2 floors of the Deschâtelet building. Of course, there's security aspects where we'd manage and accessibility so that everything is isolated, but we just love the piece, the intergenerational piece that we can do, we can touch and help those residents who often deal with loneliness, and also address the well-being piece of the younger kids that need additional support. Currently we've spoken about it, but the MOU with the city for the park and the gym and the community center has been great. So that's underway. We just desperately need this building, this zoning amendment, for us to be able to put all those wonderful pieces together. And so this is what we're hoping to get from you and request today. Thank you for hearing me.
You're on mute, Chair. I assume you're going to me to ask a question.
Sorry, I didn't know I was on mute. No, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a very quick question. Thank you very much, Malcolm, for being here, and thanks for all the discussions we've had throughout the last couple of years around this. Some questions come up in the community about the level of commitment, and I just wanted to ask you around your level of commitment. I understand there's a conditional sale agreement right now with Regional, and that you're actually already undertaking some work in the building as part of that agreement early on. Can you just briefly touch on that?
Of course, I agree with what you said, and definitely we are taking risks. We are expecting this school to be open as soon as possible. Of course, the COVID closures kind of affected that, but we're aiming for as soon as possible, and right now for the beginning of the next school year, if not sooner. So this makes it very tight for with respect to deadlines, and so the school, with the board's approval, has taken calculated risks, if I may call it that way, and has invested amounts. We've established a early access agreement with Regional. We're working on that so that we can start, and we've identified some contractors to begin designated substances removal. We've given that contract out, went to tender, got everything done, and so we've invested, or we're going underway, are investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in this project, and we're very much involved and committed. And from our understanding, well, not from what we're seeing, we know that Regional is as well. And from what we're hearing from the city and Mr. Weary, the city is as well very much invested in making this work.
Yes, thank you so much for that. You've been a wonderful partner to work with so far. I know Regional has with the city as well. So I appreciate everything you've done to advance this, and certainly is a need for a continuing French language school in that area of Old Ottawa East. So very much appreciate this.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go back and just, you think that Paul Goodkey is now in the queue, Melody? Paul? Okay. Is Luke Coulin there? Let's go with Luke. Luke Poulin.
I think he's also with the school board, Madam Chair, and Mark
Yeah.
Marcus is with the school board.
So maybe he's just here for questions. That's right. Dan Paquette.
I'll defer.
Thank you very much. Dan Paquette, Dan, do you need to say anything or are you here for questions?
Well, I'd like to say a few things.
Okay.
So Dan Paquette's my name. I'm a planner and I'm the applicant for the zoning portion of this matter, the technical zoning, which assumes a severance and the severance in response to Mr. Rose's comment is required because we need a free and separate title for the land for the school board. I'm here today with the architect, Doug Vandenham, and also we've got some help with from Novatech if there's any transportation questions. But my basic position is that I'm in support of the staff report recommendation, which is basically to permit a school in the building. That's the biggest portion of the zoning application. Yes, there are some ancillary pieces. The parking has to be made available off-site, so we need a provision to reflect that. They've secured 16 parking spaces in the P1 level of the condos that are being built on the west side of Forecourt Park. Visitor parking is not a requirement in the zoning. Visitor parking will be made available through street parking. Oh, excuse me. So visitor parking, the way that's going to work is the street parking, and Novatech has spoken to that. Now, I should add, this is a very green school. A lot of people live in the neighborhood. A lot of people cycle. A lot of people transit. So we are expecting a lot of people who are going to make their way to school to visit and what have you to come that way. The other thing we're looking for is to normalize the setback on the west side. It's actually a 3-meter setback. The zoning requires 5, but the existing condition is 3. So we need a zoning bylaw amendment to recognize that existing scenario. And then the height thing, we're not asking for a height increase. We're simply, there's a bunch of things that stick out on the roof. They're called normal rooftop projections. We just need the bylaw to permit those. Normal rooftop projections. So that's what the bylaw is asking for. The bylaw is throwing a holding zone at us, which we acknowledge, and we understand it's a good way to protect the community in terms of the the other things, the other components of this deal. We understand that.
Okay.
So, and anyway, so basically that's it. I also want to point out that there's a few other steps to this process so that people don't think it's going to happen overnight. There is a severance that's required. There's a development agreement to be entered into. There's a lifting of the holding bylaw. And so there's other steps that are required. But basically, I'm here in support of the application. And if you have any questions, our team is here.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any questions, so I think you covered the bases quite well. Now we're going to Michael Pollowin. Michael? And before you start, Michael, I'll just point out that on standby for questions, we have Jennifer Luong and Joshua Audia. And as mentioned by Dan, we have Novatech traffic consultants, and also Kelly Rodenizer is here again as well. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Same basis, here only to answer questions, Madam Chair.
Perfect. Does anyone have any questions for any of those people that I just said? I'm going to once more ask, and for a final time, if Paul Goodkey is here. I can't see him, but this is the fourth time I guess I've asked. All right, so colleagues, do you have any questions of staff? And may I ask staff to, from what you heard at the beginning, if you have comments to make on any of the questions that were posed to us by Mr. Rose.
Madam Chair, I was listening in and walking down the street to pick up my son from school, so I will do my best to remember exactly which questions were asked. But if I remember correctly, the first question was regarding height.
Who is this, JC?
Oh, sorry, JC Renault.
All right, well, or somebody that was, that actually wrote them down, but go ahead and take a shot.
Sure. So about the height, technically there's no additional height required, only projections into the height limit. And those are for the proposed HVAC unit and the elevator overrun. And I do have confirmation from the applicant saying that the existing HVAC that's already on the De Châtelet building is currently at a height of 87.3 meters above sea level, and the proposed HVAC and elevator runoff will be no higher than 86.7 meters above sea level. So that means whatever projections above the height limit that's going onto the building will be no higher than what's already there. There's also reference to the LPAT decision that was issued last June regarding an OPA appeal. I'm just bringing up that document on my screen so I can refer to it. So that was an appeal to OPA 228 of the Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan, and the LPAT issued a decision which allowed projections above the height limit. And the wording that was used in the decision is exactly the same wording that is included in the details of zoning in the staff report today. And the other question that I remember is relating to parking. And again, I have confirmation from the applicant. I will bring up that confirmation that the 16 spaces that were calculated are based off of the zoning bylaw requirements of their projected 19 classrooms, 0.75 spaces per classroom, plus the requirements for the daycare equals 16 spaces. So that's where that number comes from. And those will be secured and reserved for the school board in the buildings at 175 Main Street and 10 des Oblates. And this has been confirmed in writing by regional as well.
Okay, Councillor Menard.
Very much, Chair. I won't take up much time. I wanted to say thank you to Kevin Wary in particular, JC Renault, and many other people on staff who have worked on this to get us to this stage. There is a complicated kind of process as we go through this, but I wanted to say thank you to them. One piece that we've been talking about is where the buses will come in. There's not many. There'll probably be 2-3 buses for this school. And I believe there's going to be lay-bys on the road next door. It's not going to be right in front of the Des Châtelet, which is an emergency route. So I just want to confirm that currently the plan is to put those buses on Scholastic, I believe it is, not right on the emergency route in front of the building. If someone can just confirm that for me.
I can confirm that the school board is exploring options to either have the school buses either on the street or on the fire route. I can also, and maybe Kevin Wary can confirm that those discussions with the city have not taken place yet. So they're only considerations so far.
Kevin Wary here. Yes, I'll confirm that the design of the forecourt park is yet to be truly even initiated. The fire route that's there has always existed there, and it will need to continue to exist. Whether or not there is school bus access across there will be subject to negotiation, but more importantly, also subject to public consultation and presentation of plans at both Heritage and through general consultation, which my department's mandate.
Okay. Thanks very much. I'm not going to ask more questions. I've asked about 100 questions offline, and they have answered them in sequence. So, and my community's been very active on this. So I just wanted to say thank you again for all the work that has gone into this. I do hope committee supports this. I think it'll be a really groundbreaking project that we can be proud of in the future. And so thank you, Madam Chair. Back to you.
Thank you. And I don't see anyone else waving at me. Yes, listen. I think this is the perfect fit for this property, for its history, for the community. I think it's just wonderful. I'm happy to be supporting it, and I hope all of you are too. On the item, wait a minute. Do I have any motions on this one? No. On the item of the zoning bylaw amendment to allow for the school to move into 205 Scholastic Drive, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried. Way to go. That's great. Thanks, everybody. So one more item that is in Old Ottawa East, and that is the zoning bylaw amendment. This is item number 4, 360 de Chatelet Avenue. So we have people here that are willing to speak if we have any questions. Does anyone have any questions? No,
I
see
don't.
no.
I don't,
Well,
and I support the application, Madam Chair.
That's wonderful. And I see no other questions. So, let's see. Just make sure I read the whole thing. Planning Committee recommend council approve an amendment to the zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 360 de Chatelet Avenue to facilitate the construction of a 9-story, 85-unit apartment dwelling mid-rise as detailed in document 2. Carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Good work, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for everybody that came out to speak. And please, Councillor Menard, let Mr. Goodkey know that I gave it the college try on trying to get him connected. Perfect. So now we're going on to item number 5. Very soon we're going to lose some counselors who have duties. One of them personal, but I know that Councillor Leeper has a very big event in his ward. And of course, the Chair of Transportation has got to be there too, because it is the renaming of the Harmer Bridge after our much loved former Mayor of Ottawa, Jacqueline Halsman. So they have
Not just a renaming, Chair, it's a brand new bridge. We'll be opening it this afternoon.
I know, but it's great. What's happened at Fisher High, right beside it? Anyway, okay. Item number 5, zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment, 2740 Cedarview Road, 4190, 4200, 4210, and 4236 Fallowfield Road. Sean Moore is the planner, and we have 2 people to speak. Adam Ferrone. Adam, are you here?
Just coming on.
Perfect. And followed by Tim Miller. Do you see Tim as well?
I'm looking for Tim.
Okay, well, Adam's first anyway, and then we also have Greg Winters and Robert Tran from Novatech that are here if needed for questions, or they may have a presentation. I'm not sure. Adam?
Hi.
The floor is yours. Yeah.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome. Sorry for the delay. I actually thought it could have been a lot later, so thank you for coming out today.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair, committee members, and the committee coordinator. Thank you for helping me do this. This means a lot to me. My wife and I have supported the secondary plan for Nepean South areas 9 and 10 since we've lived here 11 years ago. And it was only farmland when we moved in, and we don't cry wolf. We've been to the meetings, we've supported it, and we've made our life decisions regarding it. So Fallowfield used to be on the conceptual plan for the transportation master plan, which meant for widening. So at one point it was supposed to be widened, and they removed it. So the affordable plan says now that it can't be widened until post 2031. And we decided to stay here instead of moving elsewhere and enroll our kids in the school system based on that fact. As well based on the fact that across the street from us, 26 meters adjacent to our property line, the secondary plan dictated and still dictates today that there's supposed to be an institutional office area to provide jobs and employment to this area while amalgamating 3 different communities. So our home is a rural community. We're in a rural residential home on half an acre. And so now on the subject site, the applicant is proposing to throw away the secondary plan for areas 9 and 10 And 26 meters away or adjacent from our home, our rural home, they want to put 188 units of apartment buildings and some other garden slim townhomes, I guess, if you will, and on segregated land. This land is now isolated according to the secondary plan to provide these jobs and amalgamate these 3 different communities. And to put residential on this land would mean that they have no access to the existing residential community, which means that they, according to the City of Ottawa's measurements for walking distance to parks, it would be a 10-minute walk if you had a residential subdivision on this land just to enter the community, which would now make them our closest neighbor. And it's not what we signed up for. And to date, the applicant has yet to offer any reason for this. The question of can these lands be redesignated to residential from institutional/institutional office, that question has yet to be answered. All we see from the applicant is what is wanted and what is needed to achieve these wants. But I stipulate that sticking high density residential subdivision segregated from the rest of the residential units in the area doesn't conform with any of our official plan guidelines, any of the provincial policy guidelines, and more specifically, the plan, the very restrictive plan for areas 9 and 10, the secondary plan, complies with and conforms to nothing. And I know that may sound a little weird, but after 2 years of research, I can absolutely say with 100% certainty that there is no conformity to our official plan, no conformity to the provincial policy, and no conformity whatsoever to the Nepean, the South Nepean secondary plan for areas 9 and 10. And what this means for us means that they're dropping a whale in a fish pond, and they're going to force Fallowfield to be widened because the TIA says that they're inserting traffic into an arterial roadway, uncontrolled, no lights, will by 2028 require Fallowfield to be widened. And they're not allowed to plan for these conditions because it's not on the affordable plan. And we don't even have any idea if the widening of Fallowfield Road will continue. We'll come back for the next official plan. But thanks to the secondary plan, they already took this into account. So while providing, amalgamating 3 different communities and having institutional/institutional office only employment, it's like a government building or bank, it doesn't have traffic. It has different AM and PM traffic hours and doesn't conflict with our traffic in the area, but only complements it. And I'd just like to point out and like to ask everybody involved in this decision to please read the facts, because if this is allowed to exist, our home will be expropriated. If Fallowfield gets widened, that means we get expropriated. And the fundamental basis for traffic in this is invalid. It doesn't follow the guidelines for the TIA guidelines 2017, and it's based on that time. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And you did send a very extensive submission, which we appreciated receiving. Councillor Leeper, question?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I just want to make sure I understand which property is yours. When I take a look at the subject parcel, there's a little deek out of it. I'm guessing that's your property?
No, negative. That would be the only piece of property that the owner I didn't buy. I'm directly across the street. You can see some of in the design plans, a property right across the street.
Okay. Okay, no, that's good. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Is Tom Miller here? No? Okay, Greg Winters, Robert Tran, did you want to say anything, or are you just here for questions?
Well, mostly here for questions, Madam Chair, but there are some points that I just want to kind of counteract there from what the residents are basically saying here in the situation. I wholly disagree that it doesn't comply with the official plan. I think in this case, you've got an outdated secondary plan that's over 20 years old. It's the former City of Nepean secondary plan. And yes, it's been, brought forward a couple of times with some amendments. It's a document that wouldn't stand the test today under today's PPS or current city strategy under the new OP. We need to encourage more development, some moderate density increases into the urban area. Otherwise, we're never going to achieve the intensification targets that we see in the city of Ottawa. This particular community was developed on a plan, as I said, that's 20 years old, that's largely developed with townhouses and single detached houses. There's very few apartment buildings in this area. And in fact, the plan had proposed for higher densities along Strandherd Drive to accompany the business park that developed across, or is developing across the street, but that never happened. It's just towns and singles. So this is one of the last opportunities to introduce some moderate level of density and to allow for some other level of forms of housing to occur in this community. The institutional office has never materialized as it was envisioned 20 years ago. You now have a developing business park across the street that's just starting to hit its strides with some recent development. And so allowing some development to occur in this neighborhood where people could actually walk to work is good planning. So I fully support this. Our study did follow the TIA guidelines. We met the level of service requirements. There is no other requirements. We're not triggering a widening to Fallowfield Road. Development in the entire west end of the city of Ottawa and south end of Barrhaven is creating that need for transportation improvements, not our development. So I highly support this development. The staff report was well researched and well written. And I hope today that you'll support this application. Thank you.
So I'm going to go to Sean. I saw Sean there. Sean?
I'm here, Madam Chair.
Yeah, do you have any comments just to tie into connecting with Mr. Ferron and also with what Greg said? Because you wrote the report and you're writing the recommendation.
I mean, the only thing I'll add just to Greg's point is that the general urban area, which this falls, guides light intensification to exterior of neighborhoods, not the interior, and capping height at under 4 stories and under. And so this application, as Mr. Winters pointed out, is meeting kind of the intent of the general urban area policies. We're guiding development outside of stable neighborhoods. And in terms of the site design, we worked with residents' comments to make sure that minimal impact was done to adjacent neighbors, specifically on Newburgh Place, where there was a large buffer put in to transition. And I think the right-of-way protected is it's an arterial road on Fallowfield, so it's about over a 40-meter right-of-way that's protected across to Mr. Ferron's place.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions of planner? I see nobody waving. So committee on the zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment for 2740 Cedarview Road, 4190, 4200, 4210, and 4236 Fallowfield Road. Is that carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ferron, for coming in. I can tell you that I've got people that earlier today, a woman that lives backs on the Fallowfield was saying, you know, Jan, it was supposed to be widened in the 80s and 90s. And, you know, back then we didn't have development charges. So there was no money that was associated with any of that building. And Fallowfield absolutely was the priority, and that's why it's widened as far as it is from Woodruff to Greenbank and a little bit beyond. But as far as funding for Fallowfield of the future, it is far off. And there's, even if I wanted to do it, I mean, I've got, after Strandherd, which is $103 million, is the Greenbank realignment with 2 bridges that have to be built, etc. So we won't be knocking on your door soon to take land for a road widening. Thank you, everyone. That item is carried. Item number 6, we have speakers for this. This is a zoning bylaw amendment for 3030 San Joseph Boulevard. Councillor Tierney, are you still here? I think you had to leave. What time is it now? Yes. Okay, so instead, Vice Chair Gower is going to move a motion on behalf of staff on zoning bylaw amendment for 3030 San Joseph Boulevard. And I just wanted to let you know that while you did see Councillor and Deputy Mayor Matt Luloff here this morning, he had to leave just after lunch for some Councillor and Deputy Mayor duties. So without further ado, we will go to our first speaker, but Vice Chair Gower, can you just tell us about the motion?
Yes, so this is a technical motion to amend the details of the recommending zoning for the schedule to supersede the maximum permitted setback and to permit a maximum FSI of 4.25. Do you want me to read through the be it resolves? They're not super long, but.
No, okay, no.
Okay.
Okay, can you, it's just minimum required, minimum maximum required. I think the underlined words are the ones that have changed.
Yes, and adding some.
Floor space.
Adding some text for the floor space index. And be it
That's
further
right.
resolved that pursuant to the Planning Act, subsection 3417, no further notice be given.
Okay, so everybody has time because we have several people, delegations to speak. And first up is Ken Horn. Ken, you live in Queenswood Heights.
Sorry, Chair, if I may, just before I start hearing delegations, what is the substantial effect of the motion that's in front of us? Has staff sought to cap density compared to what residents were expecting, or is it?
Steve, are you there? Steve Ballon?
Here. Tim Mark?
Yeah, oh, Mr. Mark, go ahead.
Yes, so I was consulted on the motion, so I have knowledge of this where perhaps ordinarily you might not be expecting me to answer. The maximum setbacks were shown on the drawing, which is, I think it's document 3 to the report. They use a schedule YYY to represent it. They just weren't referred to in the motion, and so they needed to be, but nothing changes there. It's in accordance with the schedule as was presented in the report. And with respect to the floor space index, it should have been referenced from the start. There was to be an increase. Originally it was going to be 4.5, as the report says. The building was brought down, and so now it's been now it's 4.25. It should have been included in document 2. Originally it was not, and that's why it's now being inserted. It's consistent with the report as was presented, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
And Chair, just before the delegation begins, I couldn't get myself off mute. I'm certainly here. I'll keep one earpiece in as long as I can, but I actually just wanted to have I wanted your Vice Chair to read that out because it was such a long and complicated motion.
Yeah, well, I thought we had lost you because I saw you putting something on earlier and I thought, well, it's getting close to the time they both have to leave. You have farther to go, I presume. You're not at City Hall. You're probably down in your Beacon Hill, Cedarville, right?
Actually, I was at City Hall, but now I'm headed over to the site for the great ribbon cutting. But I'll keep this in my ear the whole time I can.
Okay, perfect. That's what Councillor Hubley did the last meeting. So, okay. Councillor Leeper, you're with us for a bit.
I get to walk over, so I'm here for another 20 minutes.
Okay, I'm not going to ask if you changed yet. That was an earlier conversation. So first up is Ken Horn. Ken, are you there? Oh, there you are, Ken. Can you
Okay, there we are.
There you
Okay.
are. Yeah, so just to remind you, in case you forgot from all day long, everybody has 5 minutes to speak. Go ahead. sir.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll cram it in there.
All right.
Okay, thank you. I'm speaking today about the composition of the construction site and the surrounding land, Leda Clay in particular, and its relevance to this zoning application, specifically that the higher you build, the deeper you have to dig. We welcome expansion in Orleans and the resulting benefits from responsible construction. However, this escarpment that Torgan Group wants to build into, like all of Orleans, is layered with Leda clay. As I will explain to you, the more prolonged and intensive the construction will be at this extremely sensitive site, the more risk there will be to the adjoining subdivisions and further into Orleans. Leda clay significantly differs from regular clay deposits found everywhere else in Canada outside of the Ottawa to Quebec City region. It is not found in the Toronto-Hamilton region, and this is a crucial factor because Torgan has never developed or built in Eastern Ontario soil before. Scientific studies by Carleton University, Geological Survey of Canada, and others make it clear that if Leda clay is disturbed, it becomes unstable and unpredictable. And critically, regarding this construction, these scientific studies published over the last 50 years stress that Leda clay easily absorbs and retains more water than normal soils, making it extremely unstable under certain circumstances. Conversely, it dries up more easily, causing serious and uneven long-term differential settling, endangering foundations and structures within it. It more easily allows shock waves and vibrations to pass through it, and in cases actually amplifies these waves. And in an active earthquake fault zone, such as in our own region right here, it has actually liquefied the ground with horrific consequences and loss of life, as what happened just 35 kilometers north of Orleans in Notre-Dame-de-Salette. So Leda clay's unique structure can become dangerously unstable and unpredictable when disturbed. And it's not a point of view, it is a fact. We know that numerous multi-story high-rise buildings have been built in the Ottawa area, but not into the face of an escarpment with established neighborhoods as proposed here. The Orleans escarpment is like multiple layers of a cake that also has layers of Leda clay and glacial till. As studied, it's these layers of Leda clay that will allow the transmission of shock waves to travel much, much further than normal soils and can actually amplify these shock waves. Accordingly, you dig down into the strata to build a multi-level garage and foundation of a 16-story high-rise, and you will be projecting every single blast, every pile-driving shock wave through these layers of Leda clay in the escarpment and amplifying them into the surrounding subdivisions with resulting damage to homes and foundations. Compounding this is the fact that water reserved in the Leda clay will certainly drain down into the construction site. As the water drains and is removed, properties will subside and foundations crack, as has happened before to the Crestview home surrounding the 1970s construction in the Merivale Road area, resulting in a 7-year-long battle and class action lawsuit brought by the homeowners that the city ultimately had to settle out of court. Of course, core samples will show various layers of strata that includes Leda clay, but these studies show it's the very presence of Leda clay that makes it an impossibility for anyone to assure this committee that constructing a 16-story high-rise into this escarpment will not cause damage to the homes it abuts. Even the Patterson Group geotechnical study has caveats on this. This, by their own definition, a limited geotechnical study, states that the site is, quote, considered adequate for proposed development. But then they contradict themselves in their own report by listing hazards, particularly, quote, vibrations caused by blasting or construction operations could cause detrimental vibrations to the adjoining buildings and structures. Their further advice on that, to quote, pre-construction survey to minimize the risk of claims during or following the construction. So they advise the site is adequate, but that you're going to get sued and to prepare for it. Not to mention that this fails to satisfy section 1.3 of the city's reporting guidelines, requiring that, quote, the development will not cause adverse effects or aggregate a hazard either on site or elsewhere. Furthermore, the site doesn't even abut the Plaza Orleans complex and LRT zone. It actually abuts and is part of the escarpment and Queensville sites and Orleans subdivisions that immediately surround it. That's not an opinion, that is a fact. For all the properties listed on Torgan Group website, their own website, they show they have never developed or constructed a building over 5 stories high. And they've never done a 16-story high-rise building, let alone one on Leda clay and in an active earthquake fault zone such as ours. And this is critical because the area that Torgan wants to experiment on has suffered 2 separate landslides just a number of decades ago. In the 1980s, this property was deemed unbuildable by the city of Cumberland. That was changed somehow. Maybe somebody wasn't paying attention, but today you are. Today you still have the opportunity to step back with the facts and avoid getting involved in yet another problem-plagued project that affects so many people that can otherwise be avoided today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Horn. Good presentation, and you were right on time. I appreciate it. I don't see anyone with.
I used to be an auctioneer. No.
I'm not surprised. Well, then if you did, if that's a lie, then you should be.
No.
When you retire, semi-retire. Guy Decay.
I
Guy
don't
or
see him
Dee?
in the list.
Okay, I'll ask for him again. Michael Thornburg. Michael, are you here? Oh, hi, Michael. You're in the middle of Holiday Squares, of Hollywood Squares. Go ahead, you have 5 minutes, sir. Thanks for sending in your slides. Is he on mute?
I'll unmute myself. That's amazing. Thank
Perfect.
you very much, Madam Chair, councillors and visitors. So my name is Michael Thornburg. I live at 243 Kennedy Lane West, just east of the proposed development. I wanted to speak on the aesthetics of the proposed building at 3030 St. Joseph Boulevard. For I believe that the proposed variance to the height of this building is very inappropriate in relation to the local community in which it's located. The building will be constructed into a cliff adjacent to Dufour Drive, a street which provides the primary access to the Queenswood Heights community from St. Joseph Boulevard to the south. Queenswood Heights contains about 12,000 residents and 4,500 homes. Next slide, please. I prepared slides using elevation sketches from the Torgan application and superimposed them over my own pictures, so you'll forgive the oddness of the images. But this view is from the north, from across St. Joseph Boulevard facing south.
Mark?
The building lies in a commercial area zoned for a maximum of 8 stories. An 8-story structure would cause the building to extend approximately 24 meters above grade at the top of the hill. This is within the current zoning bylaws. However, the proposed variance to 16 stories would tower 48 meters above grade at the top of the hill. And that variance would double the height of the building visible from the top of the hill, the residents there. Next slide, please. And this slide contains an excerpt from the city's own Urban Design Review Panel report. You have a copy of the full report in your package. The highlights are mine, but you'll note that the architects on this panel have serious concerns over the proposed building height. The application represents, in their words, overbuilding of the site. And it's worth noting that the study was based on the original 12-story application. Now the variance request is for an even larger building to 16 stories in height, double the current zoning allowance. On the next slide, you'll see to the west the view from down Dufour Street from a residential area composed of 1- and 2-story homes. The building would be placed about 220 meters away from adjacent residential homes on Dufour. The structure would impose and overwhelm the doorway to this community. The next slide, showing from across Dufour to the east, the closest adjacent home would be just over 70 meters away. An additional 8 stories from the approved area to the building would directly intrude over the privacy of the properties. Once again, following the next slide, this is the north elevation from across St. Joseph Boulevard and Farm Boy. Farm Boy management have said that they would not welcome such a huge development, as inevitably their parking lot would be occupied with residents, visitors, and patrons to the high-rise building, which has limited parking. A variance to a building on the small sloped corner property is 16 levels, with 2 parking levels only underground, is entirely egregious, inappropriate, and out of character with the surrounding community. It reminds me of the 2 huge Bridgel towers at Highway 174 and Trim Road. It would be the same height. The next slide just shows some adjacent buildings along St. Joseph Boulevard. And the structure would harmonize with none of these buildings. For the entire length of St. Joseph to the Greenbelt at its west end, there are only 3 buildings higher than 2 stories tall. Next slide, showing buildings nearby. Across from the proposed structure is the 2-story Farm Boy retail. There's a 2-story dental building just next door to the building at the west. There's no construction nearby on St. Joseph Boulevard to the east of the property. This building should not be one to set a height precedent, as it is set next to a residential zone. It should be located somewhere more amenable to its character. Next slide, please, Melody. We do need more commercial and multi-level residential development near major transit hubs, but not at this height, this location, or at this time. Rather, a building located north of Highway 174 adjacent to the LRT, when commuters would have easier access to the train, more opportunity for parking, and would cause less road congestion on the street. You can see it by the X. And the final slide. Again, we would love to see development in our community, but we absolutely agree with your urban design panel of distinguished architects. They recommended a maximum height of 8 stories at this site. That must be the limit. And we urge you, please don't ignore the recommendations of your own review panel. Please choose a future in proper harmony with our established community. We would look for intensification in the Orleans corridor at a more gentle pace than what we see here. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hubley was commenting to me that you had an excellent presentation. So thank you very much. It was very informative. And I'm going to ask our planner on the file, Steve Bellin, to comment when the delegations are finished on what the points were that Mr. Thornburg was raising. Okay. All right. Next is Elise Adams. Elise, are you here?
Yes. Hi, Madam Chair.
Hi.
Hi.
Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elise Adams, and my family has been blessed to live in Queenswood Heights for 7 years. We live near Dufour Drive, and we walk or drive past 3030 St. Joseph almost daily. I understand there are benefits to the city if this apartment or condo gets built, and it's clear that the Toronto-based landowner is poised to make a significant profit, which is presumably why he's pushing so hard to have this variance approved. Perhaps the city will be enticed by sleek lines, shiny windows, and a handful of new taxpayers. At the same time, we have a number of residents who see great value in open views and preserving our uncluttered neighborhood. We are the families who call this place home today. With that in mind, let's have a look at the planning rationale from October 2017 that was included in the email, and we'll see if we reach the same conclusion as the authors. The official plan amendment, referred to as the OPA 150, has some specific points that I would like to address, beginning on page 13. The document states that, subject to a zoning amendment, taller buildings up to a maximum of 12 stories may be considered at the following nodes if the development provides a community amenity and meets the official plan's urban design and compatibility policies, which are within 400 meters walking distance of a rapid transit station. This doesn't apply, and it's noted in the document. Directly abutting an intersection of the main street with another main street or a transit priority corridor. This also doesn't apply. Or directly abutting a major urban facility. Here's where it gets fuzzy. This last point is being used to confirm that the subject site is a suitable location for greater building heights. However, the criteria says directly abutting. And as we can see on a map or read in this document on page 7, the site is adjacent to the mall with a road in between. It's not directly abutting. And as for the community amenity, there was initial discussion of a staircase going through the property, allowing pedestrians to continue using that shortcut. Even if a staircase is built after several years of construction, this will only allow us to take the same path that was there in the first place. There is no new community amenity being proposed. Therefore, the site doesn't meet any of the 4 outlined policies for 12 stories, yet here you are today, about to vote on 16. Now, if you would please follow me over to page 16 for my final point, we come across the term abutting again, where the document states that city staff have confirmed that the subject site is a gateway site located abutting the following street intersections. And it goes on to list several, including St. Joseph and Place d'Orleans Drive, which is across the street. We also read on page 14 that the intersections of arterial and collector roads can serve as gateways into communities. It appears as though somebody has decided to run wild with the idea of a gateway site, but I would invite each of you to have an honest look at this space and see if you agree. This is a unique location with commercial buildings on one side of St. Joseph and almost exclusively low-density residential just up the street on the other side. As Mike says, it doesn't fit in. We have a really special neighborhood full of people who care deeply about Orleans. The future LRT, revitalizing Centrum, and upgrading local storefronts are all worthy projects to keep Orleans relevant and beautiful. There are certainly locations nearby that would naturally accommodate tall buildings, but this isn't one of them. Councillors, we now leave it to you to look at the information we brought forward today and the feedback from residents to decide if a high-rise on this corner is good. Or with a little more time to get creative, I think we'll see that Orleans can do better. Thank you all so much for hearing from us today.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions. I do, but thank you. That was very well done. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Is
Thanks.
asking for the second time, is Guy Dequet here or Dequet? No? Okay, so Miguel, I see you there. So are you speaking on behalf of the applicant, Miguel Tremblay?
Yes,
And
along
I
with
see you have
Leahy.
Julie Carrera and Rod Leahy.
So I was going to go last, and Julie was going to go
Okay.
first, followed by Rod, if that's okay.
Sure, but I'm
Not there yet.
not thinking you're taking 15 minutes.
Nope.
So Julie Carrera? Julie, where are you then?
I'm right here.
Oh, I can't see you, but that's okay. I see Rod and I see, so go ahead, Julie.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Julie Carrera. I'm a senior planner at Foten Consultants. I just want to make sure our slides are up. I don't see them. Are the slides up?
Just give Melody a minute. It's been a big day. I mean, she's a genius in Ontario when it comes to Zoom. She was like the leader of the pack. There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to start off just giving a high-level overview of the area, and then I'm going to pass it on to Rod and then Miguel. So the subject property, you can see the label in orange there. It's at the corner of St. Joseph and Dufour. It's at the eastern terminus of the St. Joseph Boulevard arterial Main Street, and it's directly opposite the Orleans Town Center. The town center offers a variety of uses located within a short walking distance of the subject property, including retail stores, retail food stores, restaurants, recreational facilities, medical facilities, a movie theater, a hotel, and the Shankman Arts Center. So the subject property is located just over 400 meters of the existing Place Orleans bus rapid transit station. And as we all know, through stage 2 of the LRT project, there's a station scheduled to open in the middle of Highway 174 by late 2024. The southern edge of the subject property is located approximately 60 meters from the rear lot line of the properties of the existing homes along Kennedy Lane West. There's the Dufour Drive right-of-way, as well as an area of municipal green space located in between the subject property and these existing residential units. Given that the proposed building is sited towards St. Joseph and the rear yards, the existing units have rear yards, the separation between the proposed and existing buildings themselves is an even greater distance. Next slide, please. So as noted in the staff report and already discussed, the subject property has a significant grade change from St. Joseph up to the top of Dufour, which is typical of the majority of properties along the south side of St. Joseph. So the back portion of the ground floor commercial that's proposed along St. Joseph would go into the hill. And given the average mean grade, it's not considered a story in the zoning bylaw. The rear area of the subject property at the top of the hill will remain grassed and natural in appearance. So if you can see on photo 6 there, and as again already mentioned, the adjacent community uses the subject property as an informal cut through to the Place d'Orleans shopping center and the transit station to the north. And the original concept plan explored a pedestrian connection along the western lot line of the subject property. But there's several concerns with the steps that would be required to create a pedestrian passage there, including they would not be functional in the winter, they would not be accessible to all people, and the steps would bring pedestrians to a point along St. Joseph that is removed from the traffic lights at Dufour and would likely result in dangerous pedestrian crossings of St. Joseph. Therefore, the idea of the pedestrian connection was removed from the concept plan in our resubmission in favor of another public benefit, a publicly accessible plaza at the intersection of St. Joseph and Dufour. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the arterial Main Street designation on Schedule B of the official plan and the arterial Main Street zoning on Geo Ottawa. The arterial Main Street designation permits a wide range of both residential and non-residential uses and encourages developments which have a mix of uses, as is proposed on the subject property, which has ground floor commercial and apartment units above. The official plan identifies main streets as one of the city's target areas for intensification and calls for the gradual redevelopment of arterial main streets into denser, more pedestrian-oriented and transit-friendly environments. The slide also shows the subject property is located in Area Z on Schedule 1A of the zoning bylaw, which applies to areas located in proximity to higher order transit. So properties within Area Z are only required to provide parking for visitors of residential uses. No parking is required for residents or non-residential uses. Required parking space rate for visitor parking in Area Z is 0.1 spaces per dwelling unit, which means that approximately 16 parking spaces would be required for the proposed development, and a total of 85 spaces are proposed, which equates to approximately half a space per unit or 5 times the required number of spaces. So although there is some discomfort from residents for potential on-street parking, the project is intending to be transit supportive given its location. So I'm now going to pass.
What happened?
Let's go to the next slide, please. Good afternoon.
Hang on, Rod. I just wanted to advise you that we have found Guy Dake or Daki. He's like, he was, doesn't say his name. It says a commercial venue. And so we didn't recognize him. Rod, do you prefer that he goes before you or after you?
He can go, I guess, it doesn't matter. He can go now if he wants, and then.
How about we do that? How about we go with so Guy or Guy? Please tell me what your name is. Are you there?
Hi, hello there. My name is Guy.
It is Guy. Okay. Yes. Well, thank you. I'm glad we found you. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to all the community councillors. Many residents of Queenswood Heights have very strong concerns about the impact that the new 16-story building will have on traffic and parking in our neighborhood. The proposed building will be located within 100 meters of the high-volume intersection of Duford Drive and St. Joseph Boulevard. With the addition of new residents occupying the 144-unit building, a significant increase in traffic volume and movement can be expected at this already very busy and dangerous intersection. I find it surprising that the City of Ottawa's 2017 transportation brief did not identify any major concerns or hazards regarding traffic at this intersection, which has seen several serious accidents and at least one fatal crash in the past. This intersection is currently being policed by a red light camera. The road at Duford Drive often sees cars and buses struggling or unable to climb its steep slope in slippery winter conditions. At this time, both pedestrians and cyclists fear crossing the intersection. It should be noted that there are no bicycle lanes in St. Joseph Boulevard. Interestingly, the transportation brief says that the traffic volume seen at this intersection is currently at capacity and projects only low average increases of volume due to the new building. However, we find these conclusions to be highly doubtful since the traffic study was performed during the month of July, which is a peak vacation period of the summer with much reduced traffic. Now, if the current traffic volume is already deemed at capacity, then it will certainly be at overcapacity for any new building proposed, given the increased number of new residents living in the new high-rise. In addition, the triangular shape of the building and its immediate proximity to the intersection will significantly obstruct the view of St. Joseph Boulevard for westbound drivers coming in from Duford Drive, which will increase the hazard of crossing this intersection. Now at rush hour, eastbound drivers on St. Joseph Boulevard turning right onto Duford Drive can expect to see more backups and delays due to the increased traffic volume caused by the building tenants and business customers that are driving into and out of the high-rise building. Should this building proceed for development, very important concerns are also being raised about how traffic will be affected by the inevitable lane closures needed for construction. The building site is a very small triangular lot located on a steep slope, adjacent to a small commercial plaza to the west and with adjacent roads on the other two sides. In order to level the ground enough to start construction, the dump trucks being filled with debris from the slope will impede traffic, both on Dufour Drive and St. Joseph Boulevard. The same will occur with other vehicles needed to construct the building, as there's no level area on the land. There is very little space for heavy construction equipment to be placed, which will inevitably lead to lane and road closures. Now, we can expect that these disruptions will last 2 to 3 years and will seriously hamper the ease of access of this community gateway for Queenswood Heights residents. Regarding parking, the building has not been designed to accommodate even 1 car per unit. While the city's urban design philosophy is to increase the use of public transportation, limiting the number of parking spaces in the building design is not realistic. St. Joseph Boulevard does not have a bike lane, and walking very close to this busy street with fast-moving cars can be unpleasant and frightening. Add puddles, slush, and snowbanks into the mix, and no one can safely walk along the sidewalk. If the city wants to reduce car use, it should first put in the adequate infrastructure for walking and biking. Only very few parking spaces have been provided for visitors in the building's design, whether for building residents or supporting any retail business operating the new building. And where are the access roads for paratransport, delivery, garbage, or moving trucks and emergency vehicles? And as no parking is allowed by Place d'Orleans Mall for non-patrons, and none is envisioned on Dufour Drive going up the hill, then the only place visitors can park will be within the residential streets of Queenswood Heights, which will negatively impact residents. And we already have problems, since just last evening we were advised that a nearby dental clinic is having all sorts of problems with people parking in their parking lot who are doing business in that small commercial plaza that's next to the proposed high-rise building. Although adding and enforcing bylaw restrictions could potentially alleviate this problem, the new building will only serve to further negatively impact the street parking available to Queenswood Heights residents. Now, for the above reasons, we ask that the proposed variance to the current building height limit of 8 stories not be approved for this project or any others involving taller buildings at 3030 St. Joseph Boulevard.
Time.
Thank you for your attention and consideration of our concerns.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm glad that we found you.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone waving. I am going to go back to Rod Leahy now. Rod Leahy is the architect. Go ahead, Rod.
And could I have the 4th slide up, please, from Julie's presentation? Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll try to be brief. I know it's been a long day for everybody. The site, it's interesting that the reference back to the previous UDRP proposal, and what I want to do is sort of walk you through where we are now as a result of that meeting with the UDRP and where we've ended up in terms of the revised design and some of the key features that took place. So right off the bat, if you look at St. Joseph's Boulevard, we really widened the whole sidewalk, moving our building back to create quite a nice plaza area across the entire front of the building, and provide proper room and for bicycle walking, all the things mentioned by the previous presenter. A major feature or push on this design was actually to reduce the overall tower floor plate from where we were down to the high-rise guidelines. So we dropped down to an 8,000 square foot plate. We increased all our side yard setbacks to be in line with the high-rise design guidelines. And one of the key features was to push the building off of the intersection at St. Joseph and Dufour and create a major plaza area at that corner. You can see in our plans the large plaza area here. It hasn't been programmed yet, but we see this as a sort of joint POPs area, as well as potential for spillover for maybe a restaurant in the corner. The other key feature, of course, is by reducing the tower floor plate, we add a significant green area to the south of the site, abutting the natural green area that exists today. This is an important building. We thought this building sets up the tone for development down St. Joseph's with a 16-story anchor at the corner, and then showing that low-rise traditional Main Street flavor as you move down. If you go to the next slide, please. So you can see the comparative views of where we were with that previous UDRP panel in terms of a much lower building that sort of went into the hill, and how we've massaged it to basically increase green space at the top, to have this large plaza area at the corner, and then the widened sidewalk along Dufour. It is a very traditional mixed-use building, ground floor retail with direct access off the street, access to the underground parking garage off of St. Joseph. And we have terrace areas that sort of work into the hill as you move up Dufour Avenue. You see most of the building now has been concentrated at the lower end of the hill, trying to keep as much of the natural vegetation and replenishing it. Next slide, please. These are views, and when I say setting up the sort of the language that can be used, so the idea is we've got this concentrated development in the tower format of an 8,000 square foot plate with very large setbacks both to the east and to the west. The creation of that large plaza area as coming down Dufour, wrapping around. Again, we did that for visibility. Also we think this could be a great sort of meeting area for the community, and a respite area on the walk down the hill with benches and seating areas. And it creates a little bit of animation, and then begins to set up that language of a strong commercial presence on Dufour, and then the 4-story, 3 stories of residential above. This language can be of the lower building can be extended down St. Joseph as it begins to evolve and really become a more, I'd say, exciting street. I think the next slide, we have one more slide. Basically, just a close-up of some of these images, trying to sort of portray what we're going after with the, say, the large area in the bottom right-hand corner. Is that you see the size of this outdoor area. It's quite significant. This was a key request of the councillor to really create a unique sort of urban space in the corner. I'm very pleased with the change that took place. And I think from an urban design point of view, the panel was pleased. The design group within the city were pleased with the direction, and we sort of moved comfortably taking these changes forward. That's my presentation. The only thing I could speak to was these are sort of before and after, showing you the relative heights of the two views of the building. So you can see in the upper left, those are the original design, where the much wider, shorter building, and then the narrower building as we moved up. And you see the 4 sections of this page. Significant changes to help reduce the visual impact of our project on the residents up the hill, as also creating these more open green spaces and urban spaces that we talked to with the plaza area and the green at the top. So it's a significant change from the original UDRP proposal to where we are today, and it was well received on a sort of go forward basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Dudas has a question, followed by Councillor Ubley.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of so this has been a project that's been going on for quite some time. I know Councillor Manette was very involved in it when it was first initiated. But the concern about Lita clay and the type of soil and the erosion in this area has been consistent by the community. And I just was hoping to get a little bit of clarification in respect to what one of the previous delegations had been speaking to in terms of what your team, Rod, had been looking at in terms of shoring up this site and making sure that this building is appropriate for the land specifically and the clay that's underneath it.
Right.
So, I mean, the Ottawa area is blessed with either rock right below the surface or Lita clay. And it's throughout the whole city. It's something we deal with on a fairly regular basis. And so, in our opinion, done properly, there's not an issue. And examples of the past where there was failure, I think you can examples of probably not done properly. Our engineers obviously take this very seriously. They do an analysis and they give us the comfort level to proceed. The fact that in their reports they suggest that we maintain buildings in the surrounding area with we do pre-blast or pre-construction surveys. That's a standard thing we do in every project we do. We do it whether on rock or Lita clay. It's basically informing the developer that you have to monitor all construction work, and it's there to protect both the developer as well as the residents. So, old cracks don't become new cracks caused by the construction, and any new crack that is caused, it's recorded and it's dealt with through insurance claims. And so we're very comfortable based on the expertise of our engineer, who has spent a lot of time analyzing this, and obviously doesn't give his recommendations lightly. So.
In terms of the units within, is it going to be rental, condo?
At this point, I don't think the decision has been made. It's been geared toward a rental project at this particular time, but I don't think they want to shut the door on condo, but I believe their focus is on creating a rental building as a keep for the owners. At this point, they haven't made that firm commitment yet, but we've geared it toward a rental base.
Okay, so I will echo my colleague, my East End colleague, Councillor Luloff, in respect to his indication of not only support for this, I will be supporting this, but also that if rental units in the East End are few and far between. It's something that we're in dire need of in the East. Affordable housing as well too. I know he had indicated that. So once again, if you could keep that on your radar, that's certainly a market that we have a deficit of in the East. And in respect to this particular project, it had been mentioned that this sets the tone for the all of Saint Joseph, and it truly does. And, we will be seeing, while I empathize with all the residents who did speak about their concerns about this project, it is going to be something that we're seeing along the whole length of Saint Joseph, including in Innis Ward. And although it's 600 meters from LRT, it's 600 meters through a very wonderful shopping center. It's in close proximity to many amenities. People will have the opportunity to bike and to take transit. So, I fully agree with this development. I'm going to be supporting it. I encourage my colleagues to do so. And I think that some of the issues that residents have can be addressed throughout the process.
Councillor Hubley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a couple of questions. Some were geared around the Lita clay, so I think that's just been addressed by Rod. The other one, or part of that, is you're saying that you're going to keep track of the existing foundations, et cetera, in the area to look for damage. Because this is a builder that we're not familiar with here in Ottawa, Madam Chair, my concern, so I'd like to have some sort of an agreement done that any notice going out to residents when the construction starts, that they encourage the residents themselves to also take pictures of their foundations so that they if anything does happen to go wrong in this plan and foundations start getting cracked, they have their own evidence and don't have to rely on the out-of-town developer to provide the evidence that their foundations were damaged. So would that be possible to get that as an agreement from the applicant?
Well, actually, we do have one more speaker. Miguel is here and he's got his finger up. So let's just park that until Miguel speaks and he can speak to it.
Okay.
Glenn,
That's it
anything
then
else
for
from
me.
you, Alan?
Nope,
Thank you.
that was it. Thank you.
Glenn, do you want to wait till after Alan, after Miguel speaks, or do you have a question for him?
I could add one statement, Madam Chair. If I could, only in that it is an out-of-town developer. He would though be partnering with a Ottawa construction company to build this building, and it would be a construction company with a very strong record in the of development of this size and scale of project within the Ottawa area.
Perfect. That's
Okay,
good to know, Rod.
Thank you for that, Rod. Thank you.
And
Vice
Chair,
Chair,
I'll wait
You're gonna
until
wait?
after Tremblay.
Okay. Well, unless you have a question. Do you have a question? Because he's the one that's going to answer it probably.
I
Is
have
it
a question, but I'm not sure from the delegation group. Mr. Tremblay might be the best answer. So let's hear from him, and then I'll ask my.
Okay. Miguel?
Okay, I will be very brief. I'm not intending to revisit the policies in the report. And Julie's already covered all of the policies on our behalf. What I'll do is I'll address some of the comments from the delegations, and in particular, I feel the need to correct some of the statements that were made. I'll start with the Lolita Clay. Patterson Group has done extensive investigations well and above and beyond what would be required at the time of zoning. That's why there are some limitations to the study. And I think it's an important subtlety in that we have yet to go to a site plan control application. At the time of site plan control, the studies will be even more construction specific to the building that Rod is designing. And the remaining issues flagged in the geotech study will be addressed. And again, to Rod's point, it's very important to remember that even an out-of-town builder surrounds himself with local consultants, whether it's transportation, architectural, geotechnical, planning. And remember, if you will, Trinity, Morgard, CLV, these are all out-of-town builders. They do very well in the Ottawa climate, and they're very well suited for it. With respect to the UDRP, I'll refer you back to document 4, page 22 of the report. The comments that were raised during the delegation are relevant now. They were based on the old building. And as a matter of fact, as a result of those comments, partially that's how we got here with the new building, and in response to those comments. And those comments at page 22 are overwhelmingly supportive of Rod's redesign, including the podium treatment along St. Joseph, the enhanced separation to the rear, to those properties. I'll take you, well, the last slide's not up now, but we're benefiting from back a building of the homes along West Kennedy Lane. We're benefiting now from about 65 meters separation, which I would think most of the committee would recognize that is a very comfortable transition compared to some of the other projects that we deal with. In terms of character, and we tried to illustrate this a little bit, this area is going to change. This project anchors the eastern edge of St. Joseph, but it's across the street from a major community facility, a shopping center, a town center, and an LRT station 470 meters away. The city has already initiated the St. Joseph corridor study to go through an exercise to allocate height and density. The heights that we're showing on this site are much more modest than the heights you're going to see in the Orleans town center as a result of that transit station. In full force and effect, when those buildings come in, this building proposed by Torgan Group is actually a transition building to the residential community up the hill, which sits about 4 residential stories above the floors of this building. So the topography really does work to our advantage to provide that transition to the residential community. There was issues raised of views, and the ward councillor was particularly concerned with the impacts to those houses. And Rod actually worked considerably with the councillor and the UDRP comments to massage that. So we end up having a much slender building. The benefit of this slender building, if you go back one slide, Melody, is protection of those views. The building is considerably narrower. If you look in particular east and west elevations, efforts were made to have a much more slender building that was a little bit more mindful of the views that were existing. In terms of traffic, the Parsons report was submitted to the city. It was reviewed, it was approved. I understand that the community may not be in full endorsement of that approval, but there will be, as a matter of fact, a second report as part of the site plan. But issues of access and visibility to the intersection and transit ridership were all assessed in that transportation report. And yes, there is less parking than we see in some of these suburban buildings, still in excess of the bylaw, but about half of what you see on a typical building. And that's because there's an acknowledgement that this can be very much a transit supportive building given its strategic location in proximity to the station. So I always say this, developers have an impossible task of making everyone, including themselves, happy for parking. But I think this ratio does a very good job of that. And then the last point that Rod already touched on, there was disappointment about the loss of a potential cut through on the site. But for a range of reasons, that was impractical. But this project is not without benefits.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's it.
Glenn Gower, Councillor Gower, Vice Chair Gower, you have a question?
I do. For any of the applicant representatives, the question of compatibility came up, and compatibility always comes up when we have taller buildings in suburban area. This area of the community has had in general lower buildings. I'm not sure what the maximum would be out there now, but certainly lower than what's being proposed. Can you talk about land use compatibility and explain to me how you think that a tall building can be compatible with the existing community?
So that probably should go back to you, Miguel.
Sure. And do you mind going back to the very first slide in the presentation? I think it's helpful. We have to start with a notion of where the property is in relation to other land uses. Go to the very first one if you don't mind. That's the one. So the property actually has more synergy, to be perfectly honest, with the town center area. It falls within the St. Joseph corridor study. All of those areas in the pink bubble are going to be defined by taller buildings. There are taller buildings in proximity to the Shankman Arts Center that are permitted as of right. But the intent is to intensify those lands over time, recognizing where the transportation is going to be. These lands actually serve a purpose of transitioning to that, but recognize that as of right, you're going to have taller buildings along St. Joseph. So the context changes. And I think it's the burden of us and you as the planning committee to be mindful of plan function as to how this area will change over time. I get that there's core areas of St. Joseph Boulevard that may stay low rise. There's some heritage buildings, there's the church, there's other features there that maybe the core will stay low rise. And I think that's why Rod's used a 4-story podium to the building to recognize it's an arterial main street. It does have a bit of a low rise character. The podium transitions well into that, but the intent is to have tall buildings within proximity to transit. The job is to find out how we do it well and if this is the appropriate height. I don't know, Rod, if you have anything to add or.
No, and I think it's obviously the issue of tall building against low-rise single-family homes. It's impossible to say, that's compatible when if I took this building and I brought it up on top of the hill and put it on that street. But the fact that we've got some, as Miguel pointed out, I forget what you mentioned in terms of how many meters it was between the buildings. We've got a significant green space, and we're really orientated by our redesign to really push everything toward the town center as opposed to the residential. So we're achieving compatibility through distancing, and as Miguel points out, with compatibility with the arterial main street. So imagine if you start envisioning St. Joseph's built to its sort of planned function, we would become very compatible because that street would become in that range of sort of up to 6 and 9 story buildings. The same way The streets like I live in West Richmond Road is evolving now into from 2-story buildings into 6- and 9-story buildings along Richmond Road. And they are very much compatible with the single-family homes, a block away. So I think we're achieving that compatibility. It's just not with that immediate sense of house against tower, because we do have separation.
Thank you. That it can't, is that,
Okay, thank you.
I can't use my video anymore because my MiFi needs to be juiced up, so you can just tell the difference. I did actually lose you for a period of time because it's Barrhaven and we only have 100,000 people in one cell tower. So there you go. Are you finished, Councillor Gower, Vice Chair Gower?
I am. Thank you for the response, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I see no one else here. So we do have a motion. Who ended up moving that? Vice Chair Gower? No.
Yes, I moved it
Yes, you did.
on behalf of Councillor Tierney.
That's right, because he was leaving. So do we still have quorum? I think we do, because Chair El Shantiri has joined us. So I think we're okay right now.
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Eli, for making yourself available for us. As was determined, you can see the difference. Mr. Mark spoke to this and said that it wasn't, it was minor in nature from his perspective. That was a question we all had, just to remind you. So on the amendment, is that carried?
Carried.
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 And on the zoning bylaw amendment for 3030 San Josep Boulevard, is that carried as amended?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody that came out today. We really appreciate you hanging in there for what is a pretty long day. It's been lots longer, but it's long. The final item that we have held today is the zoning bylaw amendment for 6102 Renault Road. We do have people speaking on behalf of the applicant. Just a minute. Rather than me have to speak, read, and type, Councillor Hubley, can I just ask the committee coordinator, do we have enough people so that Councillor Hubley can leave, because he has a very important planning meeting in his ward?
Yes, with Councillor El Shantiri, you do.
Okay, so there you go, Councillor Hubley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I know that the Maple Grove one is very important to many people, so thank you. Okay, so on 6102 Renault Road, we have Dan Paquette's here. He's with Rosalind Hill, David Halpenny, Chris Lacroix. Dan, are you here for questions? I know that the Councillor Dudas, Laura, do you have questions?
Sorry, guys, I didn't think you'd be jumping on this item so quickly. But I'm here. I was kind of cold in my office. I put this sweater on.
Like speeding bullets. So, and this is the you don't have to.
Okay, we're back in business here. Okay, what did I miss?
Nothing. The zoning bylaw amendment 6102. Laura, you asked that we hold this. Is there anything, because otherwise I would have been asking if you know, if you had to speak, Dan. But the councillor does have, do you have questions, Councillor Dudas, or I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
I have two quick questions, and
Okay,
then
go ahead.
I just wanted to note something. So, and they may be for staff, they might be for the applicant, but the first question is most likely actually for staff. We just came out of that conversation, well, it felt like 5 minutes ago, but it was hours ago now, about R4. And we were talking about the impact and the lack of infrastructure and how that has to play into the factoring of these zoning amendments. So to staff, you know, I had based that motion in respect to having infrastructure lined up and ready to go when it comes to rezoning of properties. That very motion was based on this community, Bradley Estates, and the fact that it does not have pedestrian sidewalks, it doesn't have retail, it doesn't have the road infrastructure. So I'm asking staff that, you know, how does that motion, how does the infrastructure in this community play into this particular development? And are there any ways that we can look to incorporating this development and the lack of pedestrian sidewalks that are in close proximity and the lack of access to the park and ride?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to say, last week I did have a conversation with Councillor Dudas in that regard as well. Yesterday, I had another conversation with staff, with transportation staff, Phil Landry and Vivi Chi, and we're going to have another meeting after that to take a look at the councillor's concerns with respect to, I know there's some missing sidewalks along the main road that's here. Certainly through site plan control process, we can look at putting a sidewalk in front of the property or other means, perhaps a little bit down the road, and discussions with the applicant. It all depends. As well, through Section 37 is another means that we could use. There's not too many in this ward. Perhaps one on Innis, but as I said, it remains to be seen. But certainly we were having another meeting with staff to take a look at some capital projects or something to do some infrastructure in this ward, in other wards as well, where there's resurfacing that needs to be done or some chunks of missing sidewalk. So we will be continuing to work with the ward councillor and, as I mentioned, people from transportation staff to come up with some ideas to help out with things like missing pieces of sidewalk for the community.
Okay, I think that'll be wonderful. And I had one question, and this is likely for the applicant. First of all, I want to thank you because I understood that you did have a fulsome conversation with the community association and addressed a number of their concerns. But I know that one of the concerns was the number of outlets onto Saddle Ridge. And I was just curious in terms of the traffic that will be generated by this development and the number of outlets, was there any mitigating factors that were put into place in the final design?
Hello?
I think David is supposed to be speaking. He's our traffic consultant on the file. But his mic is muted, so.
Okay, I've unmuted my mic. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
And nobody sees me though, I see.
That doesn't matter. They don't see me either. Just go ahead and answer the question, please.
Sounds good. Could you repeat the question again, please?
I'm trying to understand. I know that traffic in this community is always an issue with these developments. And I know that in particular, this development, while it is a good fit for this site and I will be supporting it, there is an impact from the traffic generated, and there was concerns about the number of outlets onto Saddle Ridge particularly. So I'm trying to understand if there's been any changes that have been made or accommodations being made or the impact of the traffic that you've been assessing.
Well, there's still just the two accesses on the Saddle Ridge. But we have to remember there that the total site would generate about 24 new trips during the peak morning hour and 28 new trips in the peak afternoon hour. These are trips that are both entering and exiting the site. That's about one car every 2 minutes that this site will generate. So it actually has a very low impact on the adjacent street traffic. It's only about 2% of what the street traffic is along Renault Road. But we still have just the two access points onto Saddle Ridge. And we also have the right in, right out. I'm sorry?
No, that's enough. Sorry, internet connections, right? Once again, I wanted to thank the developer, the applicant, for working with the Community Association. I will be very brief. I just wanted to say that I will be supporting this development. Bradley Estates, Renault Road, and Navan Road are particularly lacking in infrastructure. There are gaps in pedestrian sidewalks, and both of those roads are still 2-lane rural roads. And while I understand fully, as you're saying, that we're talking about one car every 2 minutes, right down the road from this is another development of a very similar nature. Another, block down, there's another development of similar nature. So it's constantly drops in the bucket of more traffic, more people. And while I fully appreciate that and I support it, we need to have the infrastructure keep pace with the growth. So, I will be supporting this, and I thank everybody for taking the time after a very long day for holding it. I won't speak any further, but I just wanted to make sure that that point was noted.
Well, thank you, Councillor Dudas. And as you know, you and I had a conversation. When did we fit it in? On Saturday at 4:30, or I think it was. And yes, about this, and tossed around some ideas about how you're going to fill in those gaps and that. And so I'm sure that we're going to get a lot of ideas and information from our staff folks that we talked about. So good work on this. So anyone else? No, I don't see anyone else waving. I don't think we have any amendments on this. So we just have the item. Oh, sorry, Dan, you don't need to, if we're prepared to carry this, you don't need to speak further?
Other than, I apologize for messing up there. I've been with you guys since 9 o'clock this morning. And anyways, I'm back. For the record, we support the application. And for the record, we appreciate working with the local councillor and the community on this. I think it's going to be a nice project. Thank you.
Good, thank you. And it's a good look on you, I'll just say that. So, on the zoning bylaw amendment for 6102 Renault Road, carried?
Carried.
Thank you. And so, let me see, where am I going now? I think that was the last item.
That was it.
Can I move adjournment because I'm parked on the side of the Queensway, so I can say adjourn?
Well, just a minute. Let me just speak here quickly. Any notices of motion? Any inquiries? Any other business? Okay, Eli, go.
All right, so I move we adjourn.
And we'll see you on Thursday, September 24th. We don't have as heavy an agenda, but the one after that, we have another 15 items. So a busy fall, everybody. Thank you for your attention today. Thank you, Melody. Wonderful job as always.
And thank you, Madam Chair. You managed to do well under those internet circumstances.
Oh, it's just, well, I was gold on my MiFi until it ran out of juice. So take care, everyone. Thanks for your attention today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Madam Chair.